All right, thank you. So just want to formally welcome you guys. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come to our session today. And for those who are watching, whether you're watching this now or later on, just want to welcome you and just thank you so much for coming. So today we're gathered here to talk about stress, something that we all know very well, right? And our topics are from 3 different perspectives. How do we live it? How do we love it? And how do we let it go? And this training is being provided by the Lincoln Center for Family and Youth. My name is Alicia Farmer, and my position here is Training and Development Manager. And I'll get further into who I am as we keep going. So I just want to share with you really quickly our objectives and basically what we're going to be talking about today. Stress management for parents, explore research based on evidence of best parental practices that support our children. And we're going to evaluate some research that talks about DNA patterns and a study called epigenetics. And then we're also going to discuss the theory of reflective parenting. So if you wouldn't mind, just take a minute to look at the images. We have an infant, we have a toddler, we have school age, and we have young adults. So the question here for us to consider is, which picture best describes the current parenting stage that you are in, right? So we have an infant, which is where I am at. We have a toddler, I'm also there. And we have school age, I'm also there as well. So Mom, if you wouldn't mind just sharing which stage you're in of parenting, school age. Okay, awesome, thank you so much. Which stage of parenting are you in? We have young adult, school age, toddler, or infant?
Young adult.
Young adult.
Acting like
which stage?
toddler.
Thank you for sharing. And which stage would you be, parenting would you be in? Young adult, school age, toddler, or infant?
Well, my grandchildren are toddlers, and my children are young adults.
Nice, thank you for sharing. So oftentimes, if you look at this picture, this is what families look like or parenting looks like on TV. Everybody's smiling, we're all together, we're happy, everything's peaceful, and we're good, we're well behaved. But I want to just take a minute to burst your bubble. This is what parenting actually really looks like in real life. So we have a father on this side who's trying to discipline and the child's not hearing it. Anybody ever been there? We have a mother in the middle trying to balance being there present for her child as well as balancing work. Anybody ever been there? Then we also have these moments where we're just really happy. We're genuinely enjoying our children and our families. And then if you're married, raising your children with your spouse, sometimes the kids can kind of turn you against each other. The kids are like this because it's your fault. No, it's your fault. They get that from your side of the family, and we go on and on. And then again, those moments where we just love our kids, they bring us joy. Those moments where our family just completes us. And then we have those moments where we're just like, I don't know what to do at this stage. And so this is what parenting really looks like in real life. As parents, we have a lot on our plates. And so I want you to just take a moment before we really get into the meat of why we're here and what we're going to be talking about. Just take a moment to think about what's on your plate and whatever stage you're in, what's on your plate, right? And so you can see this picture and this image of this mom who the kids are in the background, they're kind of jumping and wild, and she's just like, I need some peace. You can kind of imagine what she's thinking and what's going through her mind. So before you share out, just take a moment to think about what's on your plate. What all do you have to do? What are you responsible for at this stage? Mom, if you wouldn't mind sharing.
Managing just the household in general. Not always meals that can be shared 50-50 because Dad's a good cook.
Good.
Teaching my children how to, especially now, manage time and prioritize. And just overall making sure that everybody's well-being is intact, including my own. Absolutely,
and I love how you mentioned that because we're going to mention self-care, of course. So a little bit more about me as far as what's on my plate. A mom of 3 children. 1 on the way, which was not planned. That was not supposed to happen. But we will be here in December. So for me, it would be marriage. It would be cleaning. I'm the cleaner of the house. Even if my husband tries to do it, there's just something that he misses and it bugs me. So with all of his efforts, I managed to do that, and he does the laundry. So we kind of, shift those responsibilities, but it would be managing friends, right? And managing church managing work, managing family, cooking, the kids, homework, self-care, and I'm also in school at the moment. And so all of those different things are on my plate at the moment. I just want to show you my family. This is my 3-year-old daughter, Lauren. She is my heart. This is my husband. I call him my oldest child. We kind of joke. He just happens to be 40 years old. And then up the top, this is Princess, our oldest. She's 17. And then this is my son, LJ, and he just turned 1. So all of these different hats that we wear, this is how we kind of manage parenting. So our first topic, we're going to talk about stress and how we live it. So again, we're talking about stress from 3 different perspectives. How do we live it? How do we love it? And how do we let it go? We're going to talk about why or how we live stress, because we know that stress is inevitable. It's going to be here, but how do we manage it? And then how do we love it? Because stress is actually a good part for our lives. And then how do we let it go? Parental stress is defined as a psychological reaction when parents experience parental demands that they don't have the resources to meet. So on this side, we just kind of identify some of those contextual demands and some of those stressors, right? And if you don't see anything on here, you can kind of share out after we cover these, what's something that may be missing that you find or can identify as a stressor in your own individual life, just to personalize it. So some of the stressors as a parent can be insufficient resources, not having enough. Depleted physical energies. You're giving all of your energy to your children, trying to be present. You're giving all of your energy to your spouse if you're married. And then, like you mentioned, trying to find some way to include yourself in all of these different responsibilities. So self-care. Limited time. If you're working all the time, if you're working a lot, trying to provide for your families, you can experience limited time. Lack of supportive parenting skills, maybe communication. I don't know how to get through to this child. The demands of young children, the demands of older children. Having a balance, external and internal support, meaning family to call on when you need a break or when you have something to do. It could be marriage. And then again, it could be lack of self-care. How do I fit myself into all of these different things? Childcare, family structure, child maturity. So let's start with childcare as another stress identifier. So researchers back in 2004 talked about childcare and how sometimes a stressor for parents can be trying to find the right care for your child, right? And even for me at this stage, one of my biggest stressors before our children were into childcare is the quality of childcare that they would have. Would this person care for my child as if I care for them? Would the teachers be knowledgeable of how to speak to them and how to engage them and how to care for them? So that's a stressor that a lot of families experience. Family structure as well, right? Most of the time, research will say that children sometimes they have a better outcome if there is mom and dad in the household, right? Because if mom needs a break, dad can pick up the slack. If dad needs a break, then mom is able to pick up the slack. Family structure may be important in determining self-care because 2 parents have more combined time to care for children than single parents. And this is what research says. Married parents also may be less likely than single parents to have children care for themselves because they are likely to have more economic resources. And then as we move down, we want to talk about child maturity, right? If we're talking about school-age children, parents may take the child's level of responsibility and maturity into account when they choose self-care over other types of supervised care. So you may choose self-care if you can trust your child to go to school, walk home with their keys, not lose them, not misplace them, do their homework, things like that. You feel a little bit more at ease to do what you need to do for yourself. Enriched activities, community. Enriched activities is another factor that causes us stress, right? Especially when our kids are home for the summer and they are not in school. So what are they doing while they're home for the summer? We continue to work and we continue to provide. We now have to include summer vacations and all those fun things. So another factor that is related to a child's level of responsibility and maturity is whether the child participates in enrichment activities such as sports or music lessons. Are they doing anything, outside of the home? And then another stressor And even as a former teacher, one of the main things that parents would kind of say is a stressor is the community, right? How can I have time for self-care if I can't leave my child in a safe neighborhood, right? I'm working, so I have to be at the house at a certain time, but I can't willingly just leave them there to do self-care because this is not a safe neighborhood. Neighborhood characteristics and parents' perceptions of the safety of their neighborhoods are important factors. They also contribute to stressors. I'm going to pause there. Any questions, anything that you'd like to add to that? Any stressors that you can identify with personally that you didn't see on there?
We have one participant, so I'm virtual. So to our virtual participant, do you have any questions or comments?
And while they're considering that, Mom, did you want to share?
I was just going to say, even with living in the suburbs, when you want your children to be, you know, learning how to be more self-sufficient, I think now it's a heightened awareness as my kids, there's traffic. Just being concerned about, you know, even in the suburbs, because, you know, people aren't paying attention, crossing streets, things, you know, like that I see occurring, you know, more and more, you know, accidents happening in places where they never happened years ago.
Yeah.
So, and maybe it's somebody I know who got hit by a car, so that's something I worry about, you know, just being overall cautious about, you know, your surroundings in general.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you for adding that. And that's why I say when we highlight stressors here, it doesn't necessarily have to apply to your situation, right? Because everybody's coming from a different experience. However, we still all, in some way, shape, or form, experience some type of stressor. Were there any online questions or comments?
She has not said anything yet, but I just
Okay, no problem.
let her know that if she has, I typed it as well, but if she has any questions, she can either type it in the chat or.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. So I did have a video prepared for us. However, due to some technical issues, we're not able to play it, but I just want to also just put it up here for your consideration. And this is just kind of a brief video to talk about how parents can deal with stress and just some strategies on how you can deal with stress. We will, for our online participants and those in person, we will be sending this to you. So the slides, as well as any resources, any articles that we're talking about, you will also have access to them too. I want to briefly just talk about the study of epigenetics, okay? As we're talking about stress, this is a huge study that kind of took place a couple of decades ago, and it's continuing to be talked about. It's very similar to generational trauma and stress. And so when we talk about epigenetics, what is it? Epigenetics is the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way that your genes actually work. So we all know that genes are hereditary. They're traits that are transformed from a parent to an offspring and often determines characteristics of the offspring. So if your child is acting a certain way and you're like, where did you get that from? Why are you acting that way? It's us, okay? And as much as I want to be in denial about my 3-year-old and her attitude and how she is mine 100%. Epigenetics are differences among groups who had gone through extreme physical and psychological stress. So very similar to like the Holocaust, and then also some other historical traumatic events. How does it work? Unlike genetics, epigenetics changes are reversible and do not change your DNA sequence. However, they can change how your body reads DNA. So simply put, it changes as you age, and also it changes your normal development based on the traumatic experiences that you encounter. Some epigenetic changes can be added or removed in response to changes, again, in your behavior or your environment. And we're just going to dive a little deeper into this. I do want to warn you that some of these images are very hard to look at. We're going to talk about the Dutch winter hunger, which is the original study of how epigenetics was founded and discovered upon. So this occurred from November 1944 to May of 1955. And if you see these images, these are just some of the images of some children who experienced hunger due to the Nazis withholding food from them. So it was an extreme famine during that time. And if you see these images, it's very hard to look at as a mother, right? Holding her young child, trying to figure out how I'm gonna provide for this child. If you look at her face, you can tell that there's some lack there in nutrition. So just some more information about this. During 1944, when the Nazis blocked food supply, pregnant women were extremely vulnerable. And we're talking about high stress and high traumatic experiences. Even their unborn child during this time who experienced the famine suffered greatly. So by May of 1944, when the Dutch were liberated, more than 20,000 people died as a result of starvation. Can you imagine that type of stress, not being able to provide the nutrients that your child needs, or even yourself? Researchers and scientists found that this famine impacted unborn children for the rest of their lives. As we transition to this side, as a result of this traumatic event, children who were born late during this time were a few pounds smaller than other babies, and children born early during this time were a few pounds heavier. Children who were born late during this time of the famine remained smaller for their entire lives. So what the mother experienced was transferred to the unborn baby, and it affected the baby for its entire life. That's how powerful and impactful stress can be. Children who were born early during the famine had higher cholesterol levels, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and schizophrenia. At the bottom, stress affects how you respond to certain situations, and we all respond differently. Women sometimes, and even parents, men and women as parents, they deal with stress differently. Sometimes smoking cigarettes, sometimes drinking alcohol, sometimes taking street drugs or prescriptions, which can lead to serious health problems for you and your baby. I want to pause right there after that information that we heard and the images that we saw. Think about a time as a parent where you were really, really stressed out. Think about a time as a parent where you were really stressed out. It could be recent. It can be in the past when your children were small, even as adults. I know I'm an adult, I'm married, I have my own children. I still stress my parents out sometimes. So think about your stage and a time where as a parent, you were kind of stressed out. And just kind of reflect on how you handled it, because we all handle stress differently. So just think about that for a second. A time in your life as a parent where you were really stressed out, and I want you to consider how you handled it. Nan, I'm gonna start with you.
Well, the most stress I ever had is when my young baby, my firstborn, had a seizure, and I'd never seen one, and I didn't know anything about it. We rushed the baby off to the hospital, and how did I deal with that? I stayed by his side and prayed 24/7.
Wow. How did you overcome that stress?
Well, I learned more about it. I learned that technically it wasn't life-threatening, but it certainly looked life-threatening at the time.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Would you like to share?
There were so many. My youngest, I would say, like, it was an ongoing, so it was like a chronic stress. He was like very bright, ADHD, and undiagnosed, misunderstood, and just, was not, you talk about like wanting to have your kids, get the best of everything, and he wasn't getting that. And I knew that, and so every day it was a battle, every single day between school calling or, something happening, and just, trying to work with teachers and the administration just to get him really what he needed.
Wow.
So it was, that was just everyday stress.
Yeah.
And how did I deal with it? I don't know, let's see. I cried, I ran.
Yeah.
I, probably abused my husband.
Is he still alive today? I'm just kidding.
He's still here, though.
Good.
And then I really, had a lot of courageous conversations.
Yeah.
With staff.
Yeah.
With my school.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually worked to, make change. So then I took up the advocacy part because I knew my kid had a bunch of resources and other families didn't. And so then I think that's where I just put some of the energy really into trying to help other families.
Yeah.
And to become an advocate. And so now I still do family engagement because,
because of your own
So
story.
important.
Yeah, yeah. We have somebody online?
I think so. Do you have a time that, would you like to share, Ms. Graves?
Yes.
Thank you.
She did unmute, so.
Yeah.
I was just wanting to share that 3 out of my 4 children were all babies, and I was listening to you say, like, some of the children who were born early have certain, like, special needs. And I have noticed with one of my children, she seems to struggle a lot in school. She does her best, but I still feel like, I often tell her there are opportunities in school to go to the Gear Up program. They are there to help you, but she's persistent on wanting to do it on her own. And then I have one child who has struggled from kindergarten on, and he now has an IEP. He struggled with reading, and then with the reading comes also the writing. So I've told a lot of his teachers, just give him that challenge, because he needs to know how to read. He needs to know how to also write and spell. So, I try to help him to help himself. So I never even thought of, some of the things that would go hand in hand with children being born so early. My children were born anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks early. And then only my one full-time child, my last child, he has some struggles, I guess to say, but he's pretty much on point with learning in school, but he just has the behaviors. So I was, kind of glad that you mentioned, how that goes hand in hand with children being early and some of the issues that they may develop because of that.
Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that. I really appreciate you guys sharing, because it adds such rich just participation into what we're talking about. I noticed 2 things, is that, what was her name online? Miss Graves? Okay, Miss Graves, thank you so much. I noticed that between your stories, you talked about advocating for your children. And that's one of the things that we need to bring out, is as parents, we are our child's best advocate. Because again, sometimes you think, I shouldn't have this conversation with the teacher should know this. But even though the teacher may know, it doesn't mean that your child is always going to get what you feel like they deserve and what they actually do deserve. So one of the things that I would say as a parent myself, and just even someone who went through struggling challenges and I had a mother who advocated for my education, is to always be your child's best advocate and never give up. Even with the stresses that we go through, because you're fighting the teachers, you're talking to the administration, you're saying this is what my child needs, you're trying to get your child the services, the IEPs and the meetings and schedule and all those different things. It can almost feel like the system is working against you. Like, why do I have to knock down all of these different walls to get my child what they deserve? Unfortunately, that's the world that we live in. And again, the only thing that I can say is to continue being your child's best advocate, as my mother did for me. And just a personal little story, just growing up, I struggled being in school. I struggled a lot. And it was really my learning style, my learning preference. I was online and I wasn't really waking up to do the lessons, and someone would call and read a story. And then they asked me what was the story about. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not really listening. I don't know. So then my mom took me into school and kind of getting around the wrong crowds. And then she's like, look, I have had it with you. I don't know what else to do with you, where to put you. And so she found this Christian Academy school. It was a high school. And the principal, well, number one, being face-to-face, having that face-to-face instruction really supported me in how I learned. Number 2, the principal was down to earth. She really had conversations with me about who I was, who I wanted to be. And she really guided me on the right path. And so one thing I would just say is never give up on your children, no matter what stage they are in. I know I'm going to eat these words because my oldest is 17 and she's getting into that world. So I'm getting ready to have to go through that phase myself. But, it works, because even now as an adult, not only am I successful in what I do career-wise, but I'm obtaining my doctorate, which I never thought I would be able to do. So Mom, even if people are saying your child has an IEP or whatever the case may be, as long as you continue to be there for them and advocate for them, you never know who they will become. So just never give up on your children. Thank you so much. Any other additional thoughts or any inputs? Okay. We're all good. Thank you so much. So how do we get over the stress part of it? How do we get into loving stress, right? And that sounds like a crazy concept to think about. What? I can actually love stress? It can be a good thing? Yes, stress can be a really good thing. I found this quote, which is awesome, and it speaks so much to my life. If you're busy and you have a lot going on, you have a lot on your plate like we talked about earlier, this quote was awesome. It just says, happiness is being busy doing the things that you love. So when I found out that I was pregnant, I started crying to my sisters, and I'm like, what am I going to do with another baby? I got this, I got that. I'm going to kill my husband. And, when I found this quote, it really put things in perspective for me, right? I am busy, but everything that I'm doing in my life, I actually really love doing it. I love spending time with my kids. I love spending time with my husband. I love educating myself and bettering myself. So think about that. The next time you're doing the dishes or you're cooking dinner and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna get my husband. He's not getting no covers tonight. Whatever the case may be, the next time you're doing something and those thoughts come to your mind of being overwhelmed and stressed out and why am I doing this? Just think about it. It's really good what you're doing in your life, right? Having your children, they bring you joy. It's a good thing. It's all good things. And of course, this is what our lives look like, right? We gotta call the dentist. We got to pick up the dry cleaning. We have to get milk. We have to go to the gym, schedule swim lessons, pool party. We have to schedule vacations and birthday presents, stop by the bank. We have to cook dinner, meal prep, dance recital, or sports, whatever the case may be. It almost seems like it just never stops, right? But again, when those negative thoughts come to your mind, just remember that these are all good things happening. Yes?
We do have a comment.
Yeah, of course. Bring your comments, absolutely.
She said, yes, working in childcare and education for some time now, I've observed it right away. Not really sure what she meant by that part. With my daughter, I always thought she needed the extra help and still wish that I had gone and gotten her the help.
Okay, is she able to come off mute or no?
I'm not
Okay.
sure.
So, what's the name?
She is off mute.
Hi.
Yeah, sorry. I
was just piggybacking off of my previous comment in regards to my daughter
Oh, yes. Okay.
and her struggles, and then also with the stress too, related, because, often children don't understand, like, when the parents are attempting to work with them to help them out, and, it's just, like, her thing is, I got it, I know what I'm doing. So it's kind of stressful for me. That's why I just need to comment in the chat to add on to what I had already said.
Okay.
So you're trying to help your daughter. She's becoming more independent,
Yeah.
but you're trying to still support her through that.
Yes.
Right, correct.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And she knows that is this your oldest daughter?
No, actually, she's my second oldest.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think I know your oldest, and yeah, she has Gear Up. I know she has Gear Up, and she knows she can come to Gear Up, but.
Yeah, and I encourage her all the time to go to Gear Up, like, go to Gear Up. And I think she did come, like, maybe a couple times towards the end of the school year, either last year or this year.
Yes.
But I told her, I said, utilize all of your sources. You have teachers, you have Gear Up, you have, whatever else, you have me. Use that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? It's kind of it's difficult as a parent trying to figure out how to support your children, but also let them find their way. It's really hard because you can literally see the rock that they're getting ready to trip over, and you want to save them from tripping over the rock. If you just literally listen and move over to the side, you can prevent yourself from falling. However, think about like your own childhood. Have you ever made mistakes? Has anyone ever told you to do something and you didn't necessarily listen and you had to find out the hard way, right? Have you ever done something and you had to learn it on your own? And so sometimes we have to kind of provide those same opportunities for our children and be there when they do fall, right? Because we know at some point you're going to have to figure it out on your own. And that comes with making mistakes. That comes with failure. However, when you do fall, when you do trip, when you do make a mistake, I'll still be there to support you. And not do this for you, but do it with you. So sometimes that's also a mental shift, is not doing things for our children, but doing things with them. So that's something that can absolutely be tricky, but we have to live it, we have to love it, and we have to let it go. So, why do we need stress in our lives? We actually benefit from having stress in our lives, and here's how. It helps us to meet those daily challenges. Have you ever felt like I have to get up and do something for my child today? I have to go to their school, I have to go to this meeting, I have to get this and do that, whatever the case may be. It kind of helps you, it's stressful, but it helps you to meet those demands. It motivates you to reach your goals. Stress also creates a sense of accomplishment. And it helps you to develop resilience and grit. So once you overcome something difficult, one thing that's difficult, then something comes alive and it's like, okay, let me approach this next challenge. And I think I can overcome this one too. There's also, stress also allows us to experience a mental shift, or some may call it like a cognitive shift, but it's a mental shift that helps us manage stress. Remember, stress will always be here. It's not going away. I'm not here to tell you how you can avoid stress, because that's not true. It's not reality. It's going to be here, right? And sometimes we're going to know that it's here. Sometimes we're not going to know that it's here. But how do we manage it? How do we handle it? How do we deal with it? It helps you to think more positive thoughts, helps you to overcome negative experiences. And the mental shift, or the cognitive shift, is really about changing your perspective from a negative to a positive. Reveals areas of growth in your life. So we talked about earlier, how do we handle things, when we're stressed out? Have you ever handled something not completely the right way? When you were stressed with your children, or stressed with work, or stressed with your family? Have you ever handled it in a way that's like, ooh, I didn't know that was there. Oh, I might need to work on that a little bit. That's what stress does for us. Is there any brave souls willing to kind of share a time when you were stressed in your life and you did not handle it the right way? Anybody brave to kind of share? And it doesn't matter. It could be with family. It could be personal. It could be work. Any brave souls willing to share a time when you were stressed and you did not handle it the right way? Yeah.
I know I was stressed, and
Okay, and we'll come back to you.
I felt like later on, after I did go back to college, I wasn't fair to them, to receive that backlash, and it wasn't fair for me to, throw that on them when they had nothing to do with the problem.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. And that, again, speaking about personal growth, that takes personal growth to acknowledge, hey, I was wrong in this moment. We are human, and we're not going to be perfect. We are going to make mistakes. We are going to fall. We're not always going to respond the right way. But when you acknowledge it, that always presents opportunities for growth. So thank you so much for sharing. Yes, thank you.
I'm just going to say, technology probably is something that, because when you need to take a break, whether it's working or doing something, and it's not Facebook related. It's just like you're just constantly glued to managing things, whether it's doing stuff because everything's online, and you don't step away to work, move the body.
Yeah.
You can start. I can actually start to feel it. And I'm like, I shouldn't have did that. I should have stopped what I'm doing, 2 hours ago, whether I'm overworking myself for the job or whether I'm just overworking myself because I'm trying to, manage something, for my family. So I'm working on realizing, step away and realize that tomorrow's another day, because that stuff can actually wait.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be in the now. But I think as just mothers and parents, you think, now. And
Yeah.
Because they're getting older, step away.
Yeah.
Doing that. You don't have to, sit there and, continually read and decipher something about whether it's, I would say more like it happens during the school year.
Yeah.
Deciphering what they're trying to do and managing stuff. And it's step away from this. You don't have to sit here and try to organize. I'm an organizer, trying to organize their lives. Let them do it.
Yeah.
These are just some examples that I'm
I love that.
learning. You have to let them manage these things. You don't have to sit here and do a spreadsheet on you know, how to schedule their homework and stuff because you want
Yeah.
them to be successful.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can get caught up in that, like, let me manage how they should be coming home from school, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know what, they're getting older, step away from this, make them do it. And like you said, they have to learn these lessons on their own. So if they drop the ball, you know what, you'll learn from it. And like I said, now I'm saying, you know what, tomorrow's another day. You can start over.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think we have to think about like what that produces, right? Like if we are in control of everything and if we have a close hand on everything, what type of environment and atmosphere does that create in our household? Like, is everybody happy with that? Is it creating conflict and, you know, everybody's tense? Or like you said, if you kind of step away and let them do it or do it with them and not for them, is it kind of less stress off of you and more responsibility on them? I can remember being, how old are you? How old is your son? 14, okay. I can remember being 16 and I had just got my first job working at a restaurant and I was making pennies, like $300 every 2 weeks or something. So my father had the nerve to say, okay, great. I showed him my first check, like, Dad, I made $300. And he's like, great, give me $150. I said, what? So he bought my first car and everything. He was paying the insurance and everything. And he's like, I'm going to teach you responsibility. You can't be anywhere for free when you get older. So this is how I'm going to do it. I was so mad. Now, not to say this is what you're planning on doing or any other families believe in this, but it really did benefit me a lot in the long run. I didn't see it then, but in the long run, it really did benefit me. And so I'm like, you know, I was just so mad, but when it was time for me to like move out and get my first apartment, he gave it all back to me. And so I was like, okay, I see what you were doing there. I see what you were doing. But again, like as parents, we make certain decisions, not necessarily because we want to, but because we have to, right? Like you have to. And so this is why we want to embrace those different stressors in our lives, because it can be good for us. I cannot play this video, but I thought this was the funniest thing. Oh man. Or can I play it? No?
Nobody can play it.
Okay. Say it again.
I said, well, no.
Yeah. It's not even showing up. But the image was really cute. This father, his daughter was, I guess, in high school, and she's kind of like coming into her own. She started wearing booty shorts, which he didn't really, approve of. So one day he got a pair of shorts and cut them into booty shorts. And he's like, I'm going to drop you off to school this entire week, and I'm going to look exactly like you and see how you like it. So that was a fun way of trying to communicate. This is something that I don't approve of. Rather than taking the approach of, let me get on them, let me, argue with them and just prove my point, and let me exert my dominance. I'm the parent and what I say goes. So what kind of releases us of stress is how we address things too, right? Do we have to necessarily address this in a aggressive way, or can we do it in a fun way where our kids can understand how we feel, but then we also make a moment where we can actually connect, we can come closer, right? And again, if I'm not able to play that, so I'll, we'll send this information to you. Last part of our training, let it go. Stress, live it, love it, let it go. It's not here to stay, okay? Now, we will experience it, but nobody should be living in stress every single day of your life. You should not come home every single day and say, this was the worst day ever. That's not a good life to live. Sometimes it happens in certain seasons where you're more stressed than other seasons, but we have to learn how to live it. We have to know how to love it. And we do have to learn how to let it go. Because there's a lot of different research that says when we hold on to stress, when we keep it in, obviously it affects our mental health. It affects our physical well-being, right? We develop different diseases and different things because of stress. So that's how we know that we're not supposed to hold on to it. Anybody online, or are we good? Okay. So reflective parenting, this kind of helps us with letting it go. Mental shifts, we just talked about this previously, or some may call it cognitive shift. It's the brain's ability to adapt your behavior and thoughts to new, changing, or unexpected events. In other words, shifting is the ability to see that what you're doing maybe isn't working, right? And to make things better, we kind of want to figure out, how do we adapt to these new situations? I've never experienced this before. My 3-year-old is getting into nails and makeup, and I'm like, you're 3, you know, even though it's innocent, I'm like, you're 3. So I don't know how to address that, right? 17, she's starting to crochet her own clothes. And one shirt was like, had a little string up here and it came to here. And I said, absolutely not, no. But all her friends at school was wearing it. You know what you get what I'm saying? So it's like, how do we kind of, again, approach these situations, not in an aggressive way, but in a way that kind of shifts how we communicate our needs and our expectations to our own kids. Reflective parenting, there is extensive evidence about the importance of understanding the intentions behind a child's behavior. Sometimes we get stressed because of what our kids say and what they do. But now it is more important than ever to understand why they're saying those things and why they do those things, to help us understand how to better parent them and respond. Reflective parenting also helps us to gain a greater sense of our own mind. Have you ever been a parent? We're parents. Have you ever experienced during your parenting, journey, responding a certain way that was like, did I really have to respond that way? I didn't really need to respond that way. It could have been a little different. I know I have had plenty of experiences like that. And I think when I respond a little bit more aggressively, it's not really directed because of them, because the situation that they've done could have been minor. It's some other things that I may need to impact, right? Research also suggests that understanding the thoughts and the feelings and the intentions behind your child's behavior and your own reaction can act as a buffer against difficult behavior and can help your child to regulate their emotions better. If my daughters see me in a conflict with my husband, and how I always handle that conflict is screaming and yelling, throwing pots and pans. That does not happen, but throwing pots and pans. Then as they get older, that's how they'll respond to conflict and stress. So what your children see and the example that you set in front of them oftentimes is what becomes a part of them as they get older. So this is why we need to reflect on our own parenting style. How is this helping me? How is it hurting me? How is it helping my children? How is it hurting them? And not just now, but even for their future. And my father always told me a good parent never just plans for right now. The decisions that you make is always for your child's future.